Hello, I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. Uh, I struggle with codependency, sexual integrity, uh, anger sometimes, frustration, depression, a host of other things. And my name is Diego. This is my testimony that I am doing as a form of a bullet form because one time I remember just reading off a paper and it's good and all, but I wasn't happy with that. So this is my story. I was born in New Jersey, Hoboken in 1976. Um, my mom was 15 years old when she had me, and I was a miracle. It's a miracle that I am still alive. I will say that a lot throughout my testimony. I was born 7 months old, and I was in an incubator for about a month. And it's by the grace of God and a miracle. I was less than 5 pounds. It's a miracle that I'm alive. And I live with my mom and my dad, and uh, we lived in a small apartment from what I can remember. Um, and we got by. It was a regular home. My dad had his issues, his gambling and stuff like that. Uh, so every the adults they had issues. It was back in the 80s, and things were a lot different than before. Um, I do remember that one day my mom just up and left with my mom's family, and they told us that we had to go. So we went and we moved to California, and my dad stayed behind. They told me, no, you'll see him again, and he'll meet up with us or something, and we just left. So we moved to California, and then my mom met a man. Um, we were living with, when we moved to California, we were staying at my grandmother's house often. Um, we were staying with my grandmother, and then she met this guy, and we all moved out. And I remember when we moved in with the guy, we were all very sad because we missed our grandmother. Me, my brother, my sister, we were all very sad, and he tried to comfort us and uh, make it cheerful and pretend like it was no big deal. But me and for that night we were all upset and we couldn't stop crying. Um, he might have resented that a little bit. While we were living with him, things gradually got worse little by little. Uh, he would it was the 80s, so he was not that it doesn't excuses, but he would just beat my mom and beat us, like fists and bruises and all kinds of stuff. So that was a very hard time in my life and my sister's life, my brother's life. Um, it was very painful, very it was painful, and it wasn't good seeing my mom get beaten just because she took a break from taking care of what she needed to take care of and having a meal. I remember her, him beating her, and then she would tell him, "But I'm just eating," and he just beat her for taking a break and eating. So that was traumatic, seeing my mom getting beaten and not being able to defend her or defend myself because I was like 5 years old. Um, that went on, and then with that guy, we moved to Florida. Um, and I remember I left. When I left, I don't know what grade I was in. I was doing some third grade. But when we moved to Florida, I started in second grade, and I don't know what happened. I know there was some time that we didn't go to school, but I started in second grade, and we lived there, and My mom was going to church. She grew up in the church. I grew up in the church and going to church with my grandmother. And then we got into hard times, and we ended up living in somebody else's house. And eventually, my mom found a place and a job. And I remember her going to church, and she was going to church, and she would tell us that everything was going to be okay, everything would be all right, and it turned out pretty good. We were living, she was working. We did have to spend a lot of time at home, me and my brother and my sister, because she had to work. I do remember that. I remember days where we would sit around, watch all of us together, sitting, watching TV, gaming shows, and we were all together. And I remember a lot of times being by myself, or by with my brother and my sister, my mom not being there, and me feeling very sad and wishing for times where she was with us, joking, talking, watching TV. And that was the case. I remember, I had a teacher in second grade who always cared about me, always told me, Diego, know that I love you, I care about you, you are loved, you're valuable, you're smart. She was awesome and sweet and very nice. I was not the best student. I joked around. I tried to be a clown. I had many, many defects. That went on, and she met another guy. My mom met another guy, and he was a lot nicer to us. He worked, and we often went to the beach on weekends. He started going to church with us several times and helped with construction in the church. So he was a very, very nice guy. We had that, and then a couple of after like a year, we moved to New Jersey because my mom's family was living up in New Jersey, and I do remember moving up there, and started going to school up there, and I was still a troublemaker in school. I was disappointed. I remember telling one of the teachers that I was disappointed because the girls were prettier here in Miami, and I was in third grade, which is foolish. And one of the teachers made a note of that, but that was my thing. I probably, I guess it was what I saw and my way of wanting affection and love. And I don't blame my mom because she had to work and support us, but I was alone a lot, and my stepdad had to work, and we had issues, and we lived in an apartment, and we got by. After some time, we moved back down to Florida, and then we moved down to Florida with that stepdad, and after a few months, that stepdad of ours had a drinking problem. My mom got tired of him spending his check on alcohol or gambling, and we couldn't pay the rent, so she got tired of it, and she picked up and moved out with a friend, and we were again, when we were living with the lady, she had kids and we were living with her. But when my mom got a place and I started going to school and coming home, it was back to my mom having to work, and we were home alone a lot again. We changed schools again, changed cities, changed schools. I remember I did the first half of sixth grade in one school, and then the second half of sixth grade in a different school. I never had the chance. I didn't really have time to make friends and learn how to deal with people. I tried my best to make friends, and I ended up being a clown, joking around, and just not ever learning how to make friends. Uh, During the second half of my sixth grade year, I met this lady who uh, would sell uh, boxes of chocolates, and so I started working with her. I started going to her door. She paid us $1 for every box we sold, and I learned how to work and get a little bit of money. And I was in sixth grade, but a lot of money went to help my mom with the bills um, in the house. I guess that's how she was raised, and you know, that's what happened. But I learned to work. Eventually, I remember having 3 really good days in sales, and I was really happy and like on a roll. And I remember walking to where the lady would pick me up one day when I had no school, and she would pick me up. And I remember walking, and I remember seeing my mom driving, and she offered to give me a ride to where I had to go. Um, and I did a lot of jaywalking. So I jaywalked. I ran across the street, and I got hit by a car, and I had to learn the hard way that I don't jaywalk, and that's what happened then. And she was the worst day of her life. But that's another reason that my life is a miracle. I could have died and have gotten head injury, but all I did was break my arm, and the doctor said I was very, very lucky again. Um, when I got hit by a car, I I was home, and I couldn't work and sell the chocolates. So I was home, and I remember being home one Sunday and calling a friend who went to church, and I called him and I asked him for a ride to church. He took me to church, and I went to that service, and I remember I accepted Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. Um, the church helped me, and I was going to church. I liked it, um, and eventually, after a few months or after a few weeks, I grew tired of church, and I stopped just realized that I stopped going to church, stopped staying connected to God. I started listening to the secular music and the the lyrics of, worldly secular lyrics that were not really good spiritually for myself. And before I knew it, I was 4 or 5 months of not going to church. I got sad, I ran into trouble, and then I said to myself I should go back to church. So I would go back to church when life would get hard, and this is a pattern that would follow me for a lot of my life. um, I remember back when there was a hurricane down here in Florida, Hurricane Andrew. I remember I started going and volunteering somewhere, and there was a group of kids, and we got along, and I got along with them, and but I got depressed again, and I went back to church and started going to church again. And then I did my ninth grade of junior high, and I was going to church uh, regularly, and I would sell chocolates to help my mom with the bills. Um, but I enjoyed church and going to church for a few years actually, and it was very enjoyable. It was very good for me. I did better in school. My grades got better. I started communicating with others a little bit better, and then eventually I was in doing service at the church, working with one of the teams of the drama team, and I was doing real well. And eventually, little by little, I started skipping those meetings at church and service at church, and because I was chasing girls from another church, and I wanted to go to other church meetings where there was more girls. So that's a pattern. And eventually I started going to church less. I started hanging out with other friends that were not doing the correct thing, and I remember going to a skating ring to just to have fun, and then some other kids were like, we're gonna go to the beach afterwards to hang out, and I was like, fine, I'll go with you guys. And I went, and they all hung out, and they pulled out some marijuana, and I said to myself, I'll try it, I guess. And I did. I tried it, and at that night I really didn't feel much of anything. I felt sleepy, weird, but it was a big mistake that would open the door to more heartache. Uh, so that was my beginning with chemical substance. Um, I said to myself, if I smoke pot, no big deal. I'll have some alcohol, and I started drinking alcohol. I would smoke pot. I fooled around with this older lady who um, also did some some cocaine, and I tried that, and I started trying with a whole bunch of stuff. Um, when one thing didn't please, I went to something else. Um, then I went back to. I said I got tired of it, and I went back to church, and I said to myself, you know what? I'm gonna leave all of this chemicals, and I'm gonna start going to church, and I'm gonna get my life right, and I'm gonna let God help me. So I was kind of using God to get back on track and to get my life back together um, when I would mess up. Uh, that was the case, and then quitting all those substances and chemicals cold turkey. At first I would feel good that I was going to church and grateful that I was back on track and I didn't have to do any of them, but quitting all those chemicals cold turkey caused my brain to have a bad reaction, to where one night out of the blue I was up all night, couldn't sleep. I started feeling paranoid. I thought God wanted to kill me, and he didn't want me alive, and I had upset him for all the bad stuff that I did, and that just didn't stop, and chemically my brain did not function properly then. And I went to work. I walked to work when I could have taken the bus, and I was wearing an old t-shirt because I had an office job at the time, and the people there at work knew something wasn't right, so they called the church pastor, and he came and rushed and picked me up, and he didn't know what to do with me. They tried to talk to me and tried to talk some sense into me, and they couldn't help me, so they took me to a mental hospital to try to figure out what had happened to me and why I was acting the way I was acting. And I must have said something about not wanting to live, so I was admitted, and they admitted me, and that was the first time that I was admitted into a mental hospital. After I came out of the mental hospital, little by little, I went back in a couple of times because of depression, and eventually I lost my job. Um, but little by little, I got back on track. I got another job. I started working, and I met the mother of my son and daughter, and we started dating. Eventually, I lost my job again, and because I was fooling around, smoking pot and doing stuff, um, and that was the first or the beginning of my back and forth and my damage to the relationship between me and her. also my family. Every time I lost my job, I had to go back home and live with family. I know I lived with my sister at the time, and I didn't pay her rent for many months because I was sleeping, waking up late, or any little bit of money that I got, I would waste it in pot, or looking for pot, or substance or alcohol. So it was a big mess. Eventually, I was able it was, I hopped job to job to job to job until one time a member from my church gave me a chance and gave me a job doing construction, and I was making decent money, and he was helping me out, and I was going to church, so things got on track. And um, I worked with him for a few months until I got tired of that. I wanted to spend time with the mother of our kids. I stopped going to church. I started dabbling again with pot and video games. Pot and video games is my thing, and I was had an efficiency, and I mentally I wasn't acting right. So actually, when I finished, I left the job that I was working with him to pursue another career because I wanted to work in an office instead of doing construction. And then when that happened, and I didn't lose, but I stopped getting his counsel, and I stopped going to church. I went back into the substance, and the same story played out. I ended up with paranoid thoughts and schizophrenia, and I ended up in the hospital again. And the efficiency where I was living, the people saw me get picked up by the rescue, and they got freaked out and told me I couldn't stay there anymore. So eventually I just I got a job, and um, I went from job to job. I kept relations with the mother of our kids, and she kept pushing me away because she was tired of it. But eventually we got back together, and I got her pregnant, and I had to find a way to do something and move in with her, and she allowed me to move in with her. Her family allowed me to move in with them, and I moved in, and I got a job, and I started working, and I was living with her, and we had our child, and he was born. And but I was still, I still remember I was working, I was keeping a job, but I was still messing around and smoking pot and lying to her, and it was bad. And I remember one time again I tried to quit everything, and cold turkey, and I wasn't really going to church much. I just tried to do it on my own, and I remember getting into a fight with her, an argument, a discussion. Uh, Things got a little hectic, and eventually they told me I had to leave there, so I had to find my place, another place to move into. I did that, and I had no one on top of me letting me know, listen, don't use substance. So I was free to do substance as I wanted. My self-discipline didn't last long. My self-will didn't last long, and people told me it's your problems with your willpower, and I have no willpower. For me, I have no willpower without Christ, without God in my life to help me. Um, it was back to the hospital. I tried to move out with the mother of my kids and our son, and we tried to get by, but I was smoking pot. I had another job where I wasn't making much, and I had to find a place, and she lived at home with her mom because she had no other choice. And I wasn't functioning properly. I couldn't provide for them, and that's the story with that. And so eventually I went from job to job, more substance here, more substance there. It got to the point in 2003 where I needed help. I spoke to family, and I told them I need help, and they suggested I go to a rehab, and I did. I went to a rehab from 2003 to 2004, live in rehab, um, and being in church and in that community helped me. I learned how to pray to God and stay connected to God, and by the grace of God, I enjoyed like 5 years of sobriety, um, going to church, staying in contact with God, doing what I was taught to do. Um, but I would dabble, even in sobriety. I would talk and reminisce with other people about the good old days, and how fun it was to smoke pot and do substance. And I wasn't doing anything bad. I wasn't even smoking cigarettes, but just talking about it and bringing back those memories and saying how fun it was. Eventually, one day, me and the mother of our kids got into a discussion, an argument, and I used that as an excuse to pick up, and I, you know, picked up after 5 years being clean and sober. I picked up again. I'm reading a bullet form of notes of my life. Um, I checked into I checked into I checked I did the cold turkey again, all the substances. My mind did not work properly, and I couldn't keep my job. I had to actually that time, um, I was able to keep my job, but I lost the place where I was living, and I moved back in with my mom, and I lived with my mom, and I started going to church with her, and my grandmother I would give her rides, and I started going to church, and I enjoyed a year or two of sobriety, and things were back on track, and things were going good, and I was able to get another job that paid more money, and I was real happy and real blessed. And then eventually things got good, and I got comfortable, and I got a place, and I was able to get a place. My kids would come over, and it was nice and awesome. And when things for me were going so good and so comfortable, that wasn't enough, so I needed to feel happier. So eventually I picked up some pot and started dabbling with pot again. I thought that as long as I stayed off cocaine, I wouldn't get the paranoid thoughts, and I'd be able to function properly, able to smoke pot. So I did that, and I messed around with that, and out of the blue, in the good job that I was working, I started getting paranoid thoughts. I couldn't function properly. Uh, Eventually, I ended up in the hospital again, and this time I was out of a job, and I was laying in bed depressed. When I came into the hospital, I had lost my job. I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do? How am I going to get a job? I can't function properly. And I lived with my mom and stayed with my mom for a little bit. And eventually my mom would encourage me to get out of bed, call the place and see if they'll take me back. And that's what I did. One day I mustered up the courage by the grace of God and all the advice of my family that God used to help me. I put on a shirt, a tie. I went back to that job, and I spoke to them and told them, listen, I felt sad, I felt depressed, I wasn't functioning properly, and they took me back. They took me back, and I worked some more there, and things were well, and I did good, and I worked properly, and I was able to be allowed to come back. But even when I was allowed to come back, I would wait. I hadn't even gotten my first check, and I was out drinking and partying. And I remember I was high, and I was looking at pictures that my mom made for me, for my birthday, a little collage that she made, and I was thinking to myself, uh, I need to stop. I need to stop doing that stuff. I'm driving 2 hours, an hour, distance, and then an hour back, and spending all this money just for smoke a little bit of pot, and it's not really worth it. And the Lord used that to get me off it. So I did. I started working. I started not taking those rides down there, and little by little, the Lord cleaned me up. And before I knew it, I was going to church and staying in contact with God, and going to church for my grandmother, and God was helping me, and things were good. But after a few months, it was back to the bottle and the substances. And when that didn't satisfy, I went for other stuff, um, partying, and the same thing played again. The same thing happened. Um, Eventually, that when they had given me the second chance, during that time, a year and a half later, or 2 or 3 years afterwards, I was at work, and the same thing came back, the same paranoid thoughts, and the dysfunction of the chemical screw up in my brain, and I couldn't function at work. And that time hit me really bad because I was out of work. I couldn't get back on track. I was afraid to go back to work. Had in and out of the hospital, and I just couldn't function properly. And that crisis and that time off of work lasted about 6 or 7 months, and I just didn't get better. I just didn't get better while I was living in Miami. And my mom, what she could think of was bringing me to my town, the town where I live, in Belgrade, Florida, and she moved me. We had a hurricane, and because I was living with my brothers, and they were young, they couldn't take care of me, so I moved in with my mom. And eventually I started living with my grandfather, still in that depressive state, not wanting to get out of bed. And my grandfather did help me. He told me to get up, and I had to get going, and I had to get moving, and I had to stay active, and I needed to, they didn't pressure me about finding a job, but eventually, after waking up and getting up, spending time with them, staying awake, they had coffee, so they would give me coffee, and I would think to myself, when I would wake up, I'd look forward to having coffee, and I'd have coffee, and I'd wake up, and I didn't have any money for cigarettes back then, but they bought me a pack, and my mom gave me an opportunity to do Uber with her, and she gave me a little money here and there, so I had a little bit of money, and I was able to buy my cigarettes. And when I would wake up, I'd wake up and think about, smoking a cigarette, drinking coffee, so that got me up and going. And eventually I was up and functioning and going, and I got tired of not working, so I started applying, and I was able to get a job. And I started listening to Christian music, and working, and I was happy for the 2 months. And then I waited for everybody to go to bed one night. It all started with a thought. I started thinking, well, maybe I could have a drink, a couple beers. So I waited for everybody to be sleeping. I went to the gas station, and I bought a 6-pack, and I drank it in my car, 6-pack. But that would be the beginning. I started working. Eventually, I got tired of that job and went to another job where I thought I was going to make more. And it was car selling, and we were supposed to sell cars and stuff, but I got involved with the wrong crowd. We would go out back and get drunk and smoke cigarettes all day, and not really put forth much of an effort. And all the while, I was also looking forward to the weekend where I would party, and most of my check was going to partying and smoking crack, and it was a mess. Eventually, I lost my job in the city, and I moved to my hometown, and I got a job in my hometown. I got by for a little bit off of all the stuff, but after a little while, I went back to partying, and it was really bad because I had someone who would provide me with the substance that I wanted. I got really bad into crack and doing it every chance I could get, every dime, every penny I got, every dime I got, I put it towards smoking the crack, and it was it was bad, and eventually I would take risks to get my substance. I'd go out late. I'd have I eventually I got in trouble with the law big time, and I got probation. So I was put on probation, and I was forced to drop everything. And yeah, by the grace of God, God helped me, and I got scared of everything that was happening, and the Lord used that to help me to stop. And I remember listening to a lot of Christian music and spending time to God and holding on to God, and I started going to AA meetings. Every day I would look forward to the AA meetings. They talked to me about recovery and how I needed to hang on to God and rely on God, and He was going to help me, and by the grace of God, God saved me from everything around me that wanted to hurt me, and I continued to stay connected to God and rely on Him, live by the steps, deal with resentment, and just continue that. And eventually, I was able to get a car. I was able to come and see my kids and their mom, and little by little, God restored the wreckage of my past. I did the steps during COVID. I remember attending 3 meetings of AA a day, at least one in the morning and one at night. I was really connected, and by the grace of God, that helped me a lot. Eventually, when I did get a car, I started when I got my license back, because they had suspended my license. But when I got my license back, I sought after Celebrate Recovery meetings, and I joined a couple of step studies that I stopped, that I couldn't continue because of work. But eventually I joined one step study where I was at one job that was very torturous, a very long distance job, and I remember speaking to my son's sponsor weekly, and this is in sobriety. I remember speaking to my sponsor and telling him things are so bad, I don't see how it can get better. And he would tell me over and over again, things are going to get better, things are going to change for the better. And I really didn't believe him. I didn't see how it could happen. But eventually that long distance job, I lost it. Not because of substance or anything, it was just I was screwing up. I was vaping when they didn't allow me to vape nicotine in the building, and I lost that job, and I was able to find a job in my hometown, and that's what the best thing that could have happened to me, because my health was suffering, and I was exhausted all the time, and I started working in my hometown, and I started to continue to attend the step study, and I stayed connected to God, and He did a work in my life with this job. I was able to enjoy time with my family, stay connected to them, learn about how my actions affect others and what I can do to help my family. And by the grace of God, they're my sons and daughters' mom allows me back in her life, and we have built a friendship, and the Lord has done a great work in restoring the wreckage of my past. I had to do what I had to do. I believe that I should pray like it depends on God, but act like it depends on me. Um, so I completed the step study, and I gave my testimony on stage. I read it on a paper, and very great testimony. I was very glad I did that, and I was able to do that. But I wanted to give my testimony where I am not reading it off a paper, where I'm just being real and expressing my story. So I'm glad for that. And a lot of things that happen, things are not perfect. Every day is not roses and sunshine. Even in recovery, there are times where I get sad, and I get into a depressive state. I'll lie down, and I'll feel sad, and I'll sleep it off, and I go to sleep. But I've learned to stay connected to God, not just because to stay clean and sober, but because I love God. I really love God. I'm grateful for what He's done to me and what He's saved me from, and I'm a miracle to be living at my age with all the substance, and I could have OD'd anytime. And my message is to anyone who is struggling, who feels like there's no hope. I'll tell you, if there's hope for me, and God was able to save me, He can do it in your life. Just pray to Him. I remember praying to God when I didn't believe it. I didn't believe God was going to help me, and I was asking God, if you're real and you can hear me and you're out there, please help me. I remember praying that prayer when I was hooked on coming down off a crack. I remember praying that prayer, and I remember that 3 or 4 weeks later, I was on my knees praying to God, going to church. The Lord made a way. The Lord made a way for me. He continues to make a way for me every day. There's been times in my job where I screwed up or did a mistake or something, and God helps me. God helps. God can help anyone. At least in my life, He's proven to me that if He can rescue me from what He rescued me, He can rescue anybody, and He can rescue me from anything that I go through. I know that I can rely on Him and depend on Him. I'm very grateful to Him. I'm very grateful to my family for staying faithful. I'm grateful to Him for using peoples and leaders and churches and church leaders that are faithful. My sponsor, who is faithful, accountability partners. Very grateful. If you feel hopeless, there is help. There is help, and God can help anybody. We just need to stay connected. We don't do this alone. The road to recovery is not alone, and it's never ending. It's a journey. Freedom is a journey, not a destination. So that's it. That's my testimony. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you for listening. If you need help, get help. I'm gonna put this on Facebook and YouTube. If you have a way of reaching out, you can reach out. You can private message me, and I'll get you connected, and I'll do my best to try to help you. And anything I could do, reach out to me, or reach out to an organization in your area. There are many organizations out there to help. There's Zoom meetings, there's Zoom AA meetings. Get connected to God. Get connected to God, and find help from others. Other people are willing to help people who are struggling. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day.